So, good afternoon, everybody. I want to start off by stating something important, and I think it will matter to some of you in this room. I am an extrovert. I am not neurodivergent, and I'm not here to pretend otherwise or tell you that I understand your experience from the inside. What I am is someone who spent the better part of a decade thinking I was a pretty good communicator and realizing I had a lot of room to level up. The turning point for me didn't happen at work. It actually happened at home. Let me tell you the story. So I have 3 amazing kids, each with their own struggles. And let me tell you, sometimes they can be the most challenging employees that I've ever worked with. Anyone in this room who's a parent, you know the drill. I give my kid a list of things to do. Get dressed, eat breakfast, pack your bag, find your shoes. Pretty simple stuff. And every single time, somewhere between pack your bag and find your shoes, everything falls apart. The hair isn't done, the bag isn't packed. Simple but important tasks go completely unaccomplished. For any parent, this can be very, very frustrating. But what really confused my wife and I'll admit it, annoyed us at times, is that this boy is highly capable. He can do absolutely anything he puts his mind to. So, morning after morning, he's failing to follow my list of instructions. You can imagine my frustration ensued. Well, my wife and I sat down, and before we assigned blame to him, we compared our experiences with him. We analyzed our own behavior, and here's what we figured out. I kept communicating what I wanted to say, and I was doing it in a way that worked for me, which usually meant clearly, directly, and all at once. What my son needed was something different. So here's what we changed. Instead of me giving him the list of what he needed to do to be ready for the day and moving on, I'd ask him to communicate back to me what he needed to do to be ready for the day, out loud and in his own words. And boom, when that happened, something clicked. Hearing himself say it rather than being told over and over made it stick. It wasn't stubbornness, which I thought it was for a long time. It wasn't a capability problem. I simply learned that my kid needed to process information differently than I was delivering it. Now, that's not just a parenting lesson. Most of you understand that's also a workplace lesson. I had a moment after that experience sitting in my office that changed my management style forever. And here's what I started to ask myself. Am I communicating what I want to say, or am I communicating what this person needs to hear? Because those are not the same thing. And in the friction that I've caused in professional relationships, and I have caused probably way too much, came from treating those two things like they were. Now, communication does not just travel in one direction. It goes up, it goes down, and it goes sideways. And each of those directions requires adjustment. Let me tell you another story. A few years ago, I had an engineer on my team. Technically, she was one of the strongest thinkers in the room. She could see problems before anybody else, and she knew how to solve them. But in meetings, she was invisible. Her peers didn't hear her. Leaders didn't hear her either. I watched her struggle to have her voice heard, and I thought, maybe she just needs to speak up a little bit, be more assertive, more direct, more like me. And honestly, that tells you about something about where my thinking was at the time. But when I actually sat down with her and listened, the picture got more complicated. Some of the patterns she developed, how she framed her thinking, how she waited to be acknowledged before speaking, how she encountered conversations, they weren't random, they were ingrained, rooted in a home life experience long before she ever walked into my office. The problem was not her capability. The problem was that the environment had been designed implicitly and unconsciously around a different kind of communicator. And she had been adapting herself to fit that unsuccessfully for years. So I stopped trying to change how she communicated. I started creating situations where her way of communication could actually be heard. I found moments where she was the undisputed subject matter expert, where everyone in the room, including leadership, needed to learn from her because she was the one with the information. I made space for her voice to be heard as the authority in the room, not mine. And when that happened, people hurt her. I mean, really, really, really hurt her. Not because she changed, because the conditions finally matched her communication style. The problem was never capability. The problem was an expectation of performance within an unaligned environment. Now, that experience, alongside everything I had been learning at home, gave me 3 truths that I try to carry into every working relationship. And importantly, these are lessons that matter whether you're reporting up, down, or sideways in your organization. The first is this: learn how someone needs to receive information before you decide how to deliver it. Especially with leaders above you that might seem rigid or set in their ways. They're not unmovable, but they do have patterns. How do they respond to good news? How do they respond to bad news? Do they want context first, or do they want conclusions first? The second, name the purpose of a difficult conversation before you have it out loud to the other person. For example, this is going to seem silly, but it works. I want to talk about something difficult because I think it'll make us work better together. And that's it. That's simple, okay? That kind of framing is protective. It tells the other person that this isn't an attack, and it tells you, the communicator, what you're actually trying to accomplish. And third, and this one took me the longest to learn, is that when you consistently align your delivery around what someone else actually needs, you don't just become someone they tolerate in a meeting, you become the voice they're actually listening for. That's what trust sounds like, not agreement. But the belief that when you speak, you're not just serving yourself, you're actually serving your audience. Now, I want to say something that I think is easy to miss, especially for those of you who lead teams with neurodivergent people or who are neurodivergent yourselves. Everything I just described. 1, learning how someone receives information. 2, naming the purpose before a difficult conversation. And 3, aligning your delivery to build trust. That's not just good leadership. For neurodivergent brains specifically, that kind of structure can be genuinely protective. And here's what I mean. A lot of the communication habits that leaders want, clear expectations up front, predictable patterns of feedback, they aren't arbitrary preferences. Those are conditions under which many neurodivergent people do their best work. When I started giving my son the ask to repeat his task list back to me, I wasn't doing it to control him. I was providing him with a structure that reduced the cognitive load of holding everything in his head all at once. The same is true at work. When a leader tells you, I need you to come to our one-on-one with a clear agenda, that might seem like rigidity to someone who prefers to think out loud. But for someone whose brain struggles to regulate attention or subsequent tasks, that request is a gift. It creates a container for productive conversation. What I've learned is that the structure bosses usually ask for and often demand in ways that feel inflexible frequently overlaps with what neurodivergent employees actually need to perform well. The sad tragedy is that neither side often realizes it. The manager thinks they're enforcing a standard, the employee thinks they're being forced into a mold, and they both miss the fact that they're actually asking for the same thing, just in different languages. So, if you're a neurodivergent professional learning to communicate upward, know that some of the structure being asked of you may work for you. It's worth experimenting with a bit before you resist it. And if you're a leader, know that when you create clear, consistent communication structures for your team, you're not just making your life easier. You might be making it possible for some of your people to finally show up and thrive as their full selves. I am an extrovert in a room that is designed to remind people like me to slow down a little bit, just a little bit. And I'm grateful for this very moment. So thank you. Not done. I wasn't a bad person or a bad leader. I just hadn't evolved yet and learned that my natural way of communicating wasn't neutral. It was just mine. Now, You've probably been in rooms where someone's communication style was treated as the default, and others were treated as the deviation. For years, I have been one of those individuals living that default, but not anymore. And what I know now is that the gap between what you want to say and what someone needs to hear is not a problem to be fixed by one side. It's a space that we are all responsible for, and where we can all be a positive force for change and inclusivity in this world. Thank you.